Okay, thank you guys for coming to Wellness Wednesday. I'm Lindsay Wolford. I'm the Employee Wellness Dietitian here at MD Anderson. So I appreciate you coming today and joining us. I thought this was a really appropriate topic for Heart Month, and considering today is Valentine's. We're going to be talking about sugar. And what do we know about sugar?
We love it. It's good.
We love it, but then we also, what do we keep hearing now in the news? We need to reduce it, right, in our intake. So how do we do that? And one of the biggest complaints that I get from people is not, most people are aware that they need to cut sugar. Most people are aware that we eat a lot of it, but it's the how do we do that? Or how do we cut the cravings and things that accompany when you cut it out? You guys relate to that?
Yes.
You try to cut it out, and then that's like all you can think about, and then you end up eating like 10 times the amount of sugar, and you're like, why did I even try? Like, I would have been better off just staying at that regular level. So hopefully by the end of class today, you can at least leave with a few handfuls of some ideas of things that you can do to help that situation. So let's get started. So first of all, Americans and sugar have a very, very close relationship, okay? 22 teaspoons a day is what the average American consumes, okay? That's a lot. That comes out to be around 100 to 130 pounds a year per person. Can you imagine? So I want you to imagine those little 5-pound bags of white sugar that you buy in the baking aisle. That many, times 20. That's like you as an individual. And this is, average. There are those of us who eat less and those of us who eat more. But can you imagine it just sitting down with 20 of those bags and a spoon and going to town? That's what we do in a year. A lot of sugar. Now, this also shows you that how sugar has increased. We're starting to see a decline in our intake. But over the past several decades, we used to be more around 228 calories, 57 grams per day back in the 70s, okay? And then we kind of peaked in the early 2000s, late 90s, okay? Close to doubling our amount. And now we're starting to see that taper off, but that's still a lot of sugar, right? So the main sources of sugar, at least for added sugars, are going to be from these products. So soft drinks, sports drinks, things like Gatorade, Powerade, vitamin water, that kind of stuff. Fruit drinks, things like juice, okay? We'll get to some examples of that later. Syrup, candies, cookies, cakes, ice cream, yogurt. Is anybody surprised to see yogurt on there?
Yes.
Who said yes? Yes. Because we think of yogurt as a healthy food, right?
Because they're popped up everywhere nowadays.
Right. There's a whole entire section in the grocery store for yogurts. It's no longer just like a little subsection of the dairy department, right? It's a whole aisle almost. So lots of sugars from these sources. Okay. So I wanted you to see how there's a lot of hidden sugars in different foods, okay? Because a lot of times, we know there's sugar in candy and cookies and cake, right? We all know that. But there's also added sugars. This is how it adds up to that 22 teaspoons a day, or the bags and bags and bags of sugar by the end of the year. Because there's a lot of hidden sugar in things. What do you think? How much sugar do you think is in a lot of spaghetti sauce?
Well, now that you say that, probably a lot.
Probably a lot, yeah. So 10 grams of sugar in a half a cup of pasta sauce, right? Now for a lot of people, we think we're doing good. Lindsay told me that having pasta sauce and pasta on hand is a good emergency go-to meal when you can't, right? A lot of sugar. Another thing, these yogurts, okay? Greek yogurts. We think yogurt's good, especially if you're buying Greek, right? Got a lot of protein, calcium for our bones, all that kind of stuff. This is the messages we get. How many grams of sugar? Carrie, don't cheat.
22.
What's that?
22.
So this one in particular has 15 grams. But some of them, like some of the ones where it's got the little flip thing,
Yeah.
it's kind of dessert disguised as a yogurt sort of deal, those can have up to 33, 35 grams of sugar in one serving. Now keep in mind, dairy in and of itself has some natural sugars. If you drink a glass of milk, it's going to have about 8 grams of sugar in it, okay? 8 to 12 grams of sugar. And those are natural sugars. That's not something that we can necessarily remove. That's just based on the carbohydrate that the milk contains. But when we start getting up into 15, 20, 30 grams of sugar, that's all going to be added sugar. So that's extra stuff that they've included. Okay, how about, now this I went and did this morning, you guys, down in the little convenience store downstairs. So these are products throughout the little markets, the fresh markets, fresh, that they call them at MD Anderson, okay? We think this is a healthy choice, right? I mean, the guy climbs rocks on the package. Surely it will get us through our meeting at 2, right? How many grams of sugar? 22 grams of sugar. Okay, another product, and I love this. No sugar added. Okay, careful about the labels. We'll get to that too. What do you think in this pomegranate blueberry juice? And it's a V8, so it's got vegetables, so it's even healthier. Right? We've got veggies, we've got fruit, it's pomegranate and blueberries, that's lots of antioxidants.
27.
Who wants to take a guess?
30.
Let's see here. 33 grams. Do you guys know how many grams of sugar is 1 teaspoon? 4.2, if we're being super technical. You can round it to 4. So how many teaspoons do we have in that one thing of juice?
8.
Wow.
Right. Okay. You see where those 5-pound bags of sugar seem like no sweat? Okay. How about this one? This juice is naked, right? I mean, it has nothing in it but goodness. It also says here at the bottom, no added sugar. 100% juice smoothie, green machine. What do you think?
20.
30.
53 grams. How many teaspoons is that? How many teaspoons is that? Well, that's right. So do you see how this can add up? Because, first of all, our food supply, when it's processed, naturally has a lot of sugar added to it. That's what our manufacturers do. And interesting, when you start looking, food products sold in our country versus other countries contain more sugar. Same product, more sugar here, because Americans want that and buy that. Yes, ma'am, you had a question.
So, question on that. So, how can they say that no added? So, you're saying it's no added sugar in there, but it's just from the natural sugars of
That's right. They
the product.
can't say that if it has added sugars.
Okay, so it's all
Okay.
added up.
But look, it says puree. It's not just mango juice, it's a puree. Does that make it more condensed or something? Or does that just give it more fiber?
Well, you could take a mango, well this doesn't have any fiber. If you look, it doesn't list any fiber on there, okay? So they might puree it and then strain it to remove it, you know? So what I want you to keep in mind is a lot of our food products, the packaging, there's a big marketing job going on to make us think that it's healthy, and we'll get to why that might be important for manufacturers, right? In just a few minutes. So lots of hidden sugars can add up easily. And then I had to include this one too, because I will not say who, but one of my coworkers brought this in this morning. And I said, oh, thank you, this is perfect timing. So, I know I'm terrible. I'm so glad you don't work with me. So 20 grams of sugar in 3 pieces, in 3 little chocolates. Okay?
What about dark chocolate?
What's that? Dark chocolate. I don't think they are dark chocolate. They're milk. So, but here's why this is a concern. Because we now know through a lot of research that sugar does lead to a number of chronic diseases. These being some of them. So diabetes, heart disease, certain cancers, obesity and weight gain. It's an inflammatory nutrient, so inflammation, which leads to all those same things, dental cavities, lots of issues. So to get a little more specific, with heart disease, we know NHANES did a 15-year study, and what they found was 25% if 25% of your overall calories come from sugar, okay, you have an increased risk of dying from cardiovascular disease of 50%. 50% more, in addition to what your baseline risk may be, if we're consuming 25% of our calories from sugar. Now, the interesting thing, too, is that what they also found was that that was regardless of where you landed as far as your fruit and vegetable intake. So you could be one of these people who eat salad every day for lunch and dinner and protein, but then you have tons of desserts and sugary snacks throughout the day, and you're kind of undoing the benefits of some of those healthier choices. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Study done here at MD Anderson also found that a diet high on the glycemic index. Glycemic index is a way of ranking different foods and their impact on your blood sugar, okay? So a food that's higher on the glycemic index is going to raise your blood sugar at a faster rate and to a larger extent than a food that's lower on the glycemic index. So a food that's higher on the glycemic index is going to be your sugary stuff, candy, cookies, cakes, those kind of things. Lower is going to be something like, you know, a piece of fish would be extremely low on the glycemic index. Vegetables, extremely low, okay? So it increased your risk of lung cancer. Now, who would have thought the association between sugar and lung cancer would exist? We know it may exist with other types of cancer, but I thought that was an interesting finding. And 49% increase among the subjects that had the highest intake of sugars, or ate highest on the glycemic index. And then, of course, we know eating sugar creates what? It gives us that, exactly, it triggers that pleasure center in our brain. So, which is basically dopamine, all right? Just like anything else does. You eat something yummy, we have the pleasure center triggered, right? We feel happy, we feel good, life is awesome. You have a good workout. Some people, that also releases pleasure center, okay? Sugar does the same thing, just like drugs do, and alcohol. It creates that release of dopamine. We feel happy until it's gone from our system, right? We have that crash, and then what does that trigger us to do?
Get more.
Eat more. So why now would marketers of food want to add more sugar to their products?
Get you hooked more.
Because you're going to buy more. That's right. Okay? So, and they're going to market it to you like you're healthy, so you think, I'm really doing something good for my body with this green machine smoothie, right? But that's 53 grams of sugar in. We go up, we crash, and now we need to go get something else, right? So the problem is, though, is similar to other kinds of drugs, we kind of build up that tolerance, and we need more of it to get the same effect, okay? So sugar, in a way, can become almost addictive, or at least habitual for us, for sure. So, unfortunately, the recommendations are much lower than where we're eating, okay? When we look at the U.S. dietary guidelines, 10% of total calories is what they're saying to limit it to. And if you look at a 2,000 calorie diet, which is probably high for most people, okay, unless you are male, 50 grams of sugar a day, which is the equivalent of about 12 teaspoons. Now that's pretty liberal. And when the new guidelines came out, there were a lot of people that said, why didn't you cut this down? They were trying to make it achievable for us, okay? American Heart Association has a much stricter interpretation of it, and they recommend that women no more than about 25 grams a day, which is 6 teaspoons, or 38 grams a day for men, which is about 9 teaspoons, okay? So think about that compared to what we just looked at. You could drink that one thing of juice and you'd have your sugar for over a couple days, right?
Yeah.
So is this even achievable?
No.
You're like, no, bye, leave it, I'm going to go get my Valentine's candy. So let's look at some tips for reducing intake, okay? some simple ways. It's not impossible to do, it really isn't, but you do have to be really aware of the products you're buying and what you're putting in your body, okay? So I want to show this. Let me see, hopefully it will cooperate. Quick little video of some swaps that you can do. There we go. That gets you a few ideas, right? Although I did kind of have to laugh at the one at the end about the fruit juice and tea. I'm like, I don't know that those are really swaps. But so first of all, we've got to become sugar detectives. We've got to read labels. We've got to look at ingredient lists and know the other names of sugar. So, for example, on this is a nutrition label from a thing of Gatorade. 34 grams of sugar, right? That's a lot of sugar. So turn those labels over and look at them. I brought some products today, which generally people think, oh, those are pretty healthy. Cheerios, they're made with oats, right? And we all know the Girl Scout cookies aren't good. What about Fig Newtons? Anybody buy Fig Newtons? We think those are super healthy too, right? Y'all look at some of these products and tell me how many grams of sugar we've got. Who's got the Cheerios? How much in the Cheerios? How much? 9 grams per serving. How about some of these breads? Swiss Miss, y'all? You guys have this up on your floors or in your departments? How about granola? That's oats too, you guys, right? Granola? It's got to be healthy. Then we add it to our sugary yogurt. What are some products that you're surprised by? Anybody have one that you're like, whoa? How much is in that little juice box?
Yeah, I'm surprised just the amount. I mean, 21, and that's not a big juice box.
How do they dissolve it? It's not just like fruit juice. It's
100% juice. It's just juice. Yeah. This is, as a mom, this is one of the ones that bothers me. Kids will, play a soccer game. 8-year-olds, 20 minutes of soccer, and then we give them like these 32-ounce things of Gatorade with enough sugar for, days. So check out those nutrition labels, okay? The other thing that you're going to start seeing, of course, they've bumped back the date, but we are starting to see it pop up on some products, but that is the new nutrition facts label that's going to contain added sugars. So you'll see total carbohydrates, and then you'll see under that dietary fiber and sugars. Now some of these sugars, for example, in juice and dairy products, and in some carbohydrate things like this, like the oats that are in cereal, may contain some natural sugars, right? Just like juice and dairy. But what we want to see, what we really want to hone in on is the added sugars. So that is the plain refined white sugar or other sources of unnatural sugar that's being added. So that will start to be listed, okay? So right now, how can you tell if there's added sugars in a product before these labels change? So here's the same thing. What you're going to have to also do is look at the ingredients list, okay? If it contains natural sugars, for example, it's not going to list another ingredient, right? If you look at the label like on milk, it's not going to say sugar, right? It's going to just say milk. Okay, so in a product that's processed, what you can look for are these different words listed down here. So sugar, dextrose, okay? But what I want you to realize is there are like 56 different names of sugar, okay? This is another little marketing trick that you need to know about. So, does anyone know how they list the ingredients in the nutrition on the ingredients label?
What was the most first?
That's right, by volume, okay, or weight. So the largest is first to the smallest. So if you are a manufacturer, okay, of Gatorade or Cheerios or whatever else, and you put on there sugar, and it's the second ingredient, and now we have these wise consumers that are looking in the ingredients labels to see if there's sugar in there, how could you move that down the line a little bit, where sugar's listed? So if it's done by volume, what they can do is they could pick any of these different things, okay? So they might say, okay, I need 10 grams of sugar in my product. So I'm going to add some agave nectar, I'm going to add a little fruit juice, and I'm going to add some glucose solids. Now we've taken that 10 grams and we've divided it up, maybe 3 grams each, okay? So we can list things further down the ingredients list. So consumers may look at it, they don't see the word sugar, because most people don't know what some of this stuff is. You wouldn't know, unless you had a sheet to refer to. And then it's also further down the list, so you might pick up on 1 or 2 things and think, oh, it's in really small amounts, right? But not necessarily. Do you see that? Y'all understand that trick that they're doing? So look at your label, and if you see some of these words, these are things that are added sugars, okay? So they would be the ones that we want to avoid, okay? Another thing, and this is really the easiest way to do it, is to stick with whole foods or natural foods, right? If you're not buying a processed product, then you're not going to have added sugars, okay? So a lot of people, a question I get all the time, they wonder about fruit. They say, well, fruit has sugar. Should I stop eating fruit? And the answer is no. We don't necessarily want to eat fruit in crazy amounts, right? Because that wouldn't be part of a balanced diet. And you're right, it does contain sugar. But it also contains a lot of other benefits, things like vitamins, minerals, a lot of antioxidants, okay, which are healthy for us and that our body needs to prevent disease. The advantage also of fruits is that they contain the fiber portion, which most of our processed products, they remove that. And that fiber helps to slow down how quickly our blood sugar is going to rise when we do consume something with sugar, okay? Now, if you're somebody that's trying to manage your weight or lose weight, sometimes fruit can be, challenging for those people. So that doesn't mean cut it out altogether. It just means we need to make sure that we're not eating it in excess, okay? But fruit is certainly okay. So trying to stick with whole foods will keep you, without added sugars. It will also keep that fiber in your diet, which is important for blood glucose control. Okay, the other thing we want to do is when you're looking for products is try to focus on unsweetened, okay? They make an unsweetened version of a lot of things, or lower in sugar. Sometimes it's not always lower. Do you mind if I borrow your special product here? The lower sugar oatmeal has 4 grams, so it's 1 teaspoon in a little packet compared to double or triple in some of the regular kinds. Or even better would be to just use the old-fashioned oats. Make your own, add fresh fruit, nuts, berries, things like that to it instead, okay? But definitely looking for unsweetened. Does anyone use milk alternatives like soy, almond? Okay, so you can still get vanilla if you like that, but choose the unsweetened version rather than the kind that has the sugar in it. Cooking at home. When you cook at home, you're automatically going to have more control, okay? So you can do things like add less sugar to recipes. You can also, you're more likely to use a lot of those whole foods and less processed foods, which will cut sugar, and you can also make adjustments to your recipes, okay, which can cut down on sugar considerably. Drinks, this can be a big issue. With sugary beverages, it increases your chronic disease risks, even with just 2 per week, okay? So, and when we think of sugary drinks, a lot of times we think of soda, right? But as you can see from the products we looked at the beginning, that could also be juice, okay? It could also be sports drinks and things like that. It could also be your sugary coffee beverages, okay? Any of that kind of stuff. 2 per week greatly increases risk of diabetes, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, and stroke. So trying to make better beverage choices, eliminating those sugary drinks as much as possible. Oh, sugary cocktails, that's another one I forgot to mention too. A lot of times we tend to kind of conveniently forget about stuff when we're having a cocktail, but you know, those margaritas and pina coladas, daiquiris, all those kind of stuff. Anybody go to Mardi Gras this past weekend? Those kind of things are going to be loaded with a lot of sugar too.
What about the ones that you just drink straight, like whiskey or something, or vodka?
Yeah, those are going to have a lot less sugar.
Okay.
Wine still has some sugar. Yeah, but those have
It's
not
just
the
less
sugar.
that you like.
It's more the mixers,
Okay.
exactly. It's more the mixers and not so much the alcohol, but what you put it with.
Okay.
Okay, and trying to enhance the flavor of your foods in other ways besides with sugar. So herbs, spices, citrus extract, things like that. One of the things that's also high in sugar can be, you saw in the little video, salad dressings. Store-bought salad dressings can have quite a bit of sugar for the quantity or the volume that you eat. The other thing that also has a lot of sugar is things like barbecue sauces, ketchup, those kind of things. Okay, they're kind of in that same category as spaghetti sauce, where we tend to add a lot more sugar to it. So even just a little bit can add a lot. Now, some people say, well, what about using artificial sweeteners? What about a Diet Coke instead of another soda? Or what about sugar-free candy instead of regular? What do you think about that?
Well, what about sugar-free Halls?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Sugar-free Halls.
Halls?
Yes.
Well, with Halls, you're probably not going to be eating them in a huge quantity, you know, or at least not all the time. Like you may
Right.
have more of them if you're sick
Right.
with the flu for, you know, a week or two.
Yes.
And certainly for some people, it's okay. Like for diabetics, that's really why a lot of those sugar-free candies were developed. Part of the issue with most of those products is they contain sugar alcohols, which are not absorbed. And if they're eaten in too large of quantities, they can cause GI distress, which is code for bloating and diarrhea. So I'd rather just stay clear. But the problem with a lot of artificial sweeteners is this, is they give your brain a promise that they don't keep, okay? And what I mean by that is it triggers in your brain the part that says anticipate calories, okay? And what happens is then there's no calories, right? So we started that process, and so they generally create more cravings. And we find that we want to eat more, and we crave more sugar when we use them, okay? So when you look at some of the research, people who frequently consume particularly diet sodas and stuff like that, they tend to gain more weight than they do lose. Okay, because if you think about it, we've triggered your brain and then we're consuming more calories, right? What happens is we end up eating more calories than we need. Whereas if you had eaten something sugary to begin with, then your body would know, you know, to anticipate those calories, you would consume them, your brain would say, hey, we're satisfied, and cut off. Y'all with me? Okay. So we don't recommend going this route. So those are some ways to reduce sugar. The biggest thing that you've got to do is read labels, check your ingredients list, that kind of stuff. Cut down on products that contain sugar as much as possible. But how do we cope with those cravings as we do start to cut sugar? Okay. Has anyone tried to go totally cold turkey and no sugar? Yeah. And what is kind of the result?
That's all you think about.
That's all you think about. That's right. So these are some tips. The first thing, which is really important, is to do exactly the opposite of what a lot of us attempt to do, which is to go cold turkey. Okay? Avoid going cold turkey, okay? We want to cut back gradually. And I was explaining this to some of our attendees before we started class, but it's really like a pendulum, okay? And this is true of any restrictive regimen or eating plan. When you go really restrictive in one direction, what usually happens? The pendulum is gonna swing the other way at full momentum, and you're gonna go the opposite direction, okay? What we wanna do is kind of ease ourselves into it and try to change our taste buds. So one recommendation is to start just, rather than cutting out sugar altogether, cut out foods that contain 15 or grams more of sugar per serving first. Just cut those out, the ones that are higher in sugar. So you're not getting rid of all of it to begin with, but we're cutting out the ones that are really high in sugar, okay? Let your body adjust, okay? We have to kind of reprogram our taste buds, because this is something else that'll happen for a lot of people is they're so used to having things so sweet, then when you taste something that's not sweet, how does it taste? Terrible. But if you allow your taste buds to adjust, you can get to the point where you don't require that same amount. Same thing with the whole brain and dopamine connection. We've got to reprogram it to not need as much to have the same feelings of satisfaction. So start by cutting out those really high ones. Another thing would be trying to replace higher sugar foods, some of those really high sugar foods, with fruit, okay? So if you're somebody that's constantly going for candy in the afternoon, or a soda, or a, coffee drink that's loaded with sugar, try replacing that with a piece of fruit first, okay? So you're still getting some of that natural sugar, but we're adding in the fiber to reduce how quickly our sugar is going to increase, and our blood sugar is going to increase and surge, okay? Now, we don't want to stick with this pattern forever, but it's a first step, okay, as we're adjusting our preferences. And then also diluting it. So in other words, if you've got things like the Honey Nut Cheerios, start going half and half, okay, or 3/4 Honey Nut with plain, okay, and work yourself down. You can do the same thing with like oatmeal. Add in half that packet of the sugary oatmeal and add in just some plain oatmeal, that kind of thing. With yogurt, people say, I cannot eat plain yogurt. It tastes like sour cream or whatever. Go half and half, okay? So buy a big container of whatever flavor the sugary one is that you like. Buy a container of the plain, okay, and mix it half and half. Or cut half of the yogurt, don't eat as large of a serving, and increase the amount of fruit or nuts or other stuff that you add into it. You can do that with a lot of different things. Pasta sauce, okay, use half the jar. Now you've got another half of the jar for a meal next week. Add a can of just diced tomatoes to it, okay? Y'all see what I mean by the diluting? We can do a lot of things like that to start to adjust our preference for the higher sugar. Also, we've got to balance our intake. So we want to start with a healthy breakfast. Now, I'm not advocating that you have to eat breakfast, but what I tend to see with a lot of the people that I work with is people who tend to have that really big craving for sugar in the afternoon. Almost 100%, we can look and see they don't eat a big breakfast or any breakfast. Same thing at lunch, and they also usually do not contain much protein, okay? So what you've done, let's say you skip breakfast, or let's say you eat something that's high in carbs, like you just have a bowl of cereal, carbs in your cereal, carbs in your milk, right? Sugar in both. What did you do? Or breakfast bars, that's another thing too. We eat those breakfast bars, those have a lot of sugar as well. So you've spiked your sugar trails off, you probably ate something else sugary at lunch, trails off. Here we are again, we need that up in the afternoon, right? And having a handful of nuts, when you're used to this, is probably not going to cut it, right? It's not going to give you that feeling of, pleasure, the lift, the satisfaction, right, okay? So we want to try to start eating something that's a little more solid, contains a little bit of protein, and has less sugar in the mornings and at lunch, okay? timing your treats too. So if you do have to have something sugary, eating it in a smaller amount, okay, and also not eating it along with something else. So in other words, we'd rather you have a little bit of it just after a meal rather than holding off, or a lot of people will say, I'm not going to eat as much for lunch because then I want to have that birthday cake in the afternoon, right? Or tonight at dinner. But then when it comes time to have that cake, that's all you're having, right? So it's not eaten in conjunction with anything that's going to slow down how quickly your blood sugar is going to go up. Okay? So timing your treats. Another thing to think about is our lifestyle, all right? Which exercise, sleep, and stress management all impact our cravings, okay? We know that when we exercise, we generally tend to make better food choices throughout the day, and we don't have the cravings for sugar as much, okay? So this may be another substitute is, if you do have those cravings in the afternoons or evenings, trying to substitute it with a walk instead, okay? So maybe we get some of that little dopamine lift from exercise rather than from the sugar, okay? Also, same with sleep. When we have poor sleep, what do we tend to crave? Sugar, okay? So making sure you're managing your sleep hygiene, getting good rest, 7 to 9 hours per night, okay, of restful sleep generally leads to better food choices in general. And then managing stress. There's that big connection between stress and cortisol and comfort foods, right? And what do our comfort foods usually consist of?
Sugars.
Fat and sugar, right? No one ever said, I'm so stressed, I need a salad, right? Where I really can use some beans tonight, y'all, I'm stressed. That does not happen. So, and there's a reason for that. When we eat those high sugar and high fat foods, the cortisol that's elevated during chronic stress, it helps to lower that. It helps to bring that down. Why might that be? Because that dopamine rises, right? And we're like, oh, stress relief. Okay, so there's a reason we're reaching for the Ben & Jerry's during those stressful times rather than salad, okay? So we got to manage our stress, right? We've got to find other ways to manage it and cope so that we're not setting ourselves up for failure in the sugar department, okay? And then another tip to kind of help curbing the cravings is you've really got to master your mind or gain some control a little bit in a few areas. And one is making a deal with yourself, okay? So rather than going cold turkey, doing things like, once I complete my, walk for this today, or once, if I eat healthy all day long, I'm going to allow myself to have a little bit of something. This does two things. First of all, it teaches us delayed gratification rather than how we usually operate, which is just grabbing the candy off of such and such's desk or eating without even thinking about it immediately, or, oh, that sounds good, I'm going to do it. Okay, it teaches you to delay gratification and not give in to those cravings. The other thing is that it delays, or it helps you to avoid impulse eating, okay? It allows you some time to think and reflect before you make the actual decision. So instead of just always reaching immediately and eating, automatically make your automatic response be to try to set up some kind of little deal with yourself, okay? So you can kind of relearn some of these things. And then also utilizing mindful eating, which I've done classes on and talked a lot about before. And that's really when you guys have probably heard this, but it takes 20 minutes, right, for your brain to tell your stomach we're full. There also is a time period where it takes your brain to say, oh, we're satisfied. Have you guys had the experience where you sit down to eat something that you love? Somebody tell me something that they love. We have a better
Bluebell ice cream.
Bluebell ice cream, right? You say, oh, I want some Bluebell ice cream. You're eating really fast, okay? And eventually you get to the point where you're like, that's disgusting. I can't even eat another bite. Now, 30 minutes ago, you thought it was the greatest thing ever and you couldn't resist, right? But then you eat so much and eat so fast, eventually that part of your brain, that satiety center catches up and is like, we are satisfied, please do not eat another bite, right? So when we eat more mindfully, that allows us to catch up, allows the satiety center to catch up, allows you to enjoy it without eating the same amount. We've done this experiment in classes before, and I know they do it like with the Naturally Slim program, where they have you eat a chocolate, and the first one you eat really quickly. Okay? It's not as satisfying and you want more. The second one, we have you, it's ridiculous, y'all, but we have you unwrap the chocolate, right? And you smell the chocolate, and you look at the chocolate, right? And then you take a tiny bite of the chocolate, and you let it just melt on your tongue, right? You bathe your whole tongue in the chocolate, okay? I know, it sounds silly, but what do you find after you do that?
You get satisfied quicker than.
Exactly, it's more satisfying, and you ate less, and you don't necessarily have those feelings of, I'm going to eat the whole entire package, okay? So that's really a key as well. So if you're going, I mean, of course we're going to have treats, right? It wouldn't be, our life wouldn't be as enjoyable without them. We're certainly going to never just, stop celebrating birthdays and anniversaries and whatever altogether. That's part of our life. But we've got to learn to manage it a little better, and that's what mindful eating does. So it allows you to enjoy it, but reducing the amount that you're consuming, okay? So make the change, you guys. I hope that there are tips in here today that you can utilize. You may not be able to do all of them, but at least it's a start, okay? So focusing on whole foods, reading your product labels and your ingredient lists, and then using some of these tips to reduce the cravings. Does anyone have other tips, thoughts, questions?
I have a question just on the added sugars. So are they normally labeled as far as the sugars? Are they normally labeled as far as caramel or corn syrup? Or I'm just looking at the ingredients of the product?
So currently, the nutrition facts label is not required to have added sugars listed. That's going to be coming. They bumped it back to 2020. It's supposed to be this year, actually, but it got bumped back. So at this point in time, you may find some manufacturers who have gone ahead and adopted the new labeling, but the vast majority haven't, right? Because this is not going to go well for them. So you have to look at the ingredients list. And that's where this list of different sugars comes in handy, so that you can kind of look and see.
The additional sugars that are in.
Exactly. But most of them you can also kind of tell, if it's a dairy product, it's going to have some sugar, not all of it's going to be added. If it's fruit-based or certain carbs, but if it's processed and it's got a lot of sugar, then it's added. Anything additional is added. Other questions, comments, thoughts?
So I have a question. I've been doing smoothies every morning.
Okay.
But I find, so I put soy milk, one banana, and some blueberries or any type of berries to kind of sweeten it up. And I find that around 9 or 10, I'm already starving. What am I doing wrong?
So that's a really great question. Yeah. So, and that probably has less to do with the sugar. Some of it could be due to if you don't have a whole lot of fiber or a whole lot of protein, then it's not going to hold you very well. But there's another thing that research has found that you can, when food is in a liquid form, it's not as satisfying as when it's solid. And they're wondering if the actual action of chewing helps make the meal more satisfying or triggers something that may make us, or if it's the fact that it's already partially digested, so it's really easy for it to be digested. But you can have something of equivalent calories, one is liquid, one is solid, and you're going to be hungrier from drinking the liquid sooner than if you have the solid. So my recommendation would be, first of all, what's your rationale for doing this smoothie?
Because I'm trying to lose weight, and so I thought I'd be healthier because I was driving to McDonald's every morning and getting me a egg McMuffin and and just a glass of water. And then, when I was there at McDonald's, I said, oh, well, just add the hash brown and the drink to it. And so I was finding myself, being bad all the time. So I said, okay, Michelle, you have to quit that and, try and go healthier. Well, my sister, who is a nutrition freak, said, well, maybe why don't you try some some smoothies, and and so that in that aspect that has helped. But then and I posed the question to her, and she says, well, maybe adding some protein powder to the smoothie would also
So
help.
it sounds like your rationale is to prepare something at home,
Yes.
have a healthier option, get in more fruits, hopefully something lower calorie, but it's not as satisfying. Right?
Yeah, and I'm saving money as well too.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, I think you could still do the smoothie. First of all, you want to, a serving size for a smoothie is somewhere between like 8 to 12 ounces. So if you move down more to the 8 ounces, to where you're still getting in those servings of fruit and the fiber and that kind of thing, but then add some kind of protein source along with it. You could do protein powder in it. I wouldn't recommend doing that every day, but some other options.
So adding some protein.
Adding some protein to make it a little
Like
more
a
satisfying.
boiled egg or something.
Right, a hard-boiled egg. You could do
A cheese stick or something.
peanut butter toast, avocado toast, some of those kind of things. Okay. Add tofu to your smoothie. Not as bad as you think. It really isn't. Other questions? I think I saw an arm go up, or comments, ideas. Does anybody have anything you're currently doing that's worked for you to really cut sugar?
I do apples in a teaspoon of peanut butter to substitute my sugar craving at times.
So apple spoon and peanut butter, or applesauce and peanut butter just mixed together?
Oh,
Apples and peanut butter. Yeah, that's great. And that's perfect because you're eating the whole apple, so you've got the fiber there, as well as combining it with peanut butter, which gives you some protein and a healthy fat. So all those things, fiber, protein, and healthy fats help slow down how quickly the blood sugar is going to rise. But then you still got that sweetness from the apple. So that's perfect. Other thoughts? Yeah? Was this helpful?
Yeah.
Does it give you some hope that, or at least make you feel a little relieved of part of the blame, right? Not that we're not ultimately responsible for our health and the food choices we make, but just that it is a challenge. You see that the marketers and the food manufacturers don't make it easier for us, right? But having that awareness kind of gives you a little bit more strength and the ability to make better choices, right? So if you have any questions or any other comments, please let me know. Thank you guys for being here today. And remember, next week I'm doing a class on hypertension and reducing blood pressure with food. But employee health and well-being will also be here with some of their nurses to do blood pressure checks for anyone interested. And that'll start like 15 minutes before the class begins. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sure, thank you.